let's start by defining what is a vermicompost. Vermicompost, or also known as worm casting, is the product that is obtained by the decomposition of organic matter by the earthworms, or just worms, right? This material, it's dark in color, has a humus odor. What's mean when I'm talking about humus, I'm talking about the topsoil that you find if you enter to a forest and move the leaves in the upper part of the soil, you find that rich soil that looks like dark brown, smell really well, and it's rich in nutrients, right? That's what I'm referring to humus. Humus, it's organic matter in a state of decomposition that we don't really know where it's from. It's where from animal origin or plants, or from plants. You know, it's humus. It's an organic matter in a so advanced stage of decomposition, and it is, as I mentioned in the composting in the compost webinar, it's in the way that we want to provide organic matter to our farm soils, right? Vermicompost or worm casting, it's rich in nutrients and also in microorganisms. One of the main difference between regular compost and vermicompost is this. So vermicompost have a higher presence of beneficial microorganisms, okay, when we are working with fresh vermicompost. But first, let's talk about what is an earthworm. One of my main purposes today, it's to ones who are not related to those animals, to literally change your minds about the perception you have with this kind of animals. But many times we think in earthworm as parasites or something like this, but earthworms, these kind of earthworms, have nothing to do with them. An earthworm, and by the way, today we will be using some more technical or scientific terms, as the next one, as an oligochaete. An oligochaete is a segmented roundworm. So as I here, as you can see here, it's an organism that is made up of multiple segments. In those segments, some of the organs are repeated along the body of the animal. Okay, so we will be talking about a little more in detail of anatomy of the earthworms in the next slides. Okay, so this is where this is the classification of earthworms. There are oligochaetes. Up to date, they are more than around between 4,000 and 5,000 of these organisms known, and just a few are parasites, and they are not so common in our regular environments. Okay, they are hermaphroditic organisms, which means they present both sex, female and males. So hermaphroditic comes from the Greek words Hermes, one of the gods, and Aphrodite, one of the goddess of the Greek mythology. It's the etymology of that word, right? But they need sexual contact for their reproduction. So once they reach the sexual age, they need the presence of other ones to have those gametes exchange, right? Or gametes are the same as the reproductive cells, right? They have a complete digestive system, a closed circulatory system, and a nervous system. But what they don't have, it's a brain. Earthworm doesn't have a brain, right? They have other organisms that works like a brain, but they don't have a complex brain as other animals. As well, they don't have a skeleton system. They have what it's named as hydroskeleton, which means they maintain its form because of blood pressure, right? That's the reason why you will find multiple hearts on on the earthworms, as we can see here in this diagram. So if we look here, talking about the hearts, it's are identified various, some of them. Many times they have more than two. They have a main heart and some accessory hearts to keep, to help to keep and maintain that pressure, okay, along the body of the organism. So other thing that they have, and it is really important, because I say that those animals are machined to eat and process what they eat. So that's the reason why they are so useful to produce this kind of product of vermicompost, right? So they have a complex digestive system, and their digestive system, if you see here some of the components of that system, it's a crop, a gizzard, and a gizzard. And if you are familiar to birds, it's have the same parts of a bird's digestive system. Why they have a crop and a gizzard? The gizzard have the function to break what they are eating, because earthworm does not possess teeth, right? They just suck on what they eat and then pass through those parts of the digestive system to start the decomposition of those of what they are eating. Okay, so that's a really important fact about earthworms, right? Other important issue is in the way they breathe. The breathing in earthworms they breathe oxygen, and it is absorbed directly through the skin. On each of the segment of the worm are a couple of pores where they exchange the gases with the environment, right? So for that reason, it's just really important that in the environment we place place them is well aerated, so they can grow and reproduce properly. In terms of the medium where we gonna have our worms, it is really important to maintain the adequate humidity, right? If we have a lot of water there, sometimes the water will occupy the pores that were air will be storage, right? So causing them to a lack of air to breathe, and sometimes that's get really in the worst scenario and cause the death of our worms. That's one of the main reasons people face problem with their vermicompost production, right? That's the reason why I'm explaining in kind of detail how they exchange gases, right? So oxygen, it's really important for them. Talking about the reproduction, when they reach the sexual maturity, they need, as I mentioned in a few slides ago, the sexual contact with another worm, right? They exchange those gametes by this contact, and when we see this ring in the body of the earthworms, this ring, it's called or named the clitellum. The clitellum appears when the worms is ready to reproduction. So it takes around 90 days on average, but after this organ could disappear for a while until they are ready again to keep reproducing themselves, right? So this the clitellum have the peculiarity that the clitellum pass from the bottom part of the animal through the head, and it's through by this movement the clitellum it's recollecting all those sexual gametes exchanged with the other mate, right? So they were recollecting all of this, and then it will start to produce the cocoon. So the cocoon will have all the eggs inside and will be out of the body of the earthworms by the head. once the cocoon get in the soil, it will take around 21 days to for the new earthworms to hatch. Okay, so 21 days, it's an average number, so it's depend on the species. So one will take just 14 days, other ones will take around 20, 28, 30 days. That will depend. So once they hatch, they reach on average their adulthood around the 90 days. That is when they are ready to keep reproducing themselves, right? So what is the importance of this? It is we want our worms to keep reproducing as fast as possible and in the best way as possible, because as much we have, they will process or the organic matter faster, and we will be producing vermicompost and having that product faster as possible, right? Other important issue when we are talking about this kind of production are the enemies of our worms, right? So mostly their enemies are mostly predators, right? So birds, reptiles, amphibians, and rodents are one of the principal problems that we face with in this production. Also, other big problem, and in my experience, are the main one that I face while I was having some worms with. So okay, let me stop here. So I mostly of this topic I learned it by because I have the opportunity to produce some wormcast back then, right? For some periods during the past 7 or 8 years. So right now I don't have it. I'm not producing anything right now, just working as agronomist. But in my experience, one of the biggest problem it's facing this kind of production are ants, because ants are seeking for food all the time, as we know, right? So when we are giving the worms rest of fruit skin and other debris from our vegetables, or even from our kitchen, those debris are rich on sugars, right? So ants can get there attracted by that sugar, but as well they eat on worms. So one thing I do is to maintain outside the from the worms, dance from the worms. It's a subtle method. It's if you're drinking coffee, after you brew your coffee, in the leftovers of the coffee, just let them to dry a little bit and then apply on the worm bed. So that will help you to keep out the ants as well. The ashes, my bad. The ashes works very well to maintain outside of the worm beds, the ants from the worm beds. Okay, so other people place some containers with a little bit of water around the bases of the containers to just to protect them, as using as a physical barrier for the ants to get there, right? Other enemies that are really common are centipedes. Centipedes, as you may know, they are found in the natural environment in living under the leaves into the surface of soil. So it's common for them to reach those kind, or to like those kind of environment to live. So centipedes are really common in worm beds too. So other but less common problems that we can face are pathogenic fungi and bacteria. So in my experience, and up to date, I never heard from anyone facing problems with fungi or bacteria in their vermicompost production, but it could happen, okay? Or if any of you that are present here have any problem or face any problem with fungi or bacteria, please let me know. I want to learn a little more of this, but it's not so common to have those kind of problems in in this kind of production. There are 3 types of earthworms, and now we will be talking in a little bit more technical terms, right? So there are 3 types of earthworms you can find in the nature, right? First ones and are named epigates. Epigates are the worms that live in the surface of the earth, mostly in decaying organic matter, right? In decomposing organic matter is where you find those guys, right? They have that characteristic that they complete their life cycle on in the upper layer or in the upper part of the soil, in the surface of the soil, living just in organic matter. The other ones are the endoyates. The endoyates live inside the soil or within the soil matrix. They feed on soil or on a mixture of soil and organic matter. So in healthy soils, the endoyates worms are used as a measurement of soil health, because in a healthy soil, per square meter or per square foot, you there's some people that use the amount of those earthworms to determine how healthy is your soils. So endoyates are very important worms for soil, to have a healthy soil and to improve soil. The other ones are the anesics soils. So the anesics, the anesics worm. So the anesics live in vertical channel that they create through the soil profile and feed on organic matter that they drag into these channels. So the anesics ones, on average, they are the biggest earthworms you can find, and sometimes they are not so common on soils, but because they live on those vertical channels, when there are heavy rain events and those channels get flooded, you can find those guys in the upper layer or of soil, in the surface of the soil, as outside of the soils. And sometimes anesics worms could be a headache talking about the soil health, because they have sometimes, if their population it's high, probably they tend to damage some of the physical aspect of the soils. But in nature environments where they has been living for hundreds of thousands of years, they have natural predators that keep the population in the right numbers of individuals, right? But for terms of agriculture, the most 2 important earthworms are the epigates, and the epigates are the ones that we use to produce vermicompost, because they live 100% of their life cycle on organic matter. In the other hand, we have the endoyates, endoyates, my bad with the pronunciation of the terms, the endoyates, that live within the soil matrix, and they move. One difference of the anesics is the anesics movements are vertical movement within the soil profile. The endoyates are smaller, and they tend to move in a horizontal plane within the soil. So as well, when they are eating organic matter and mixing with the soil, they are in some way fertilizing and helping to build aggregates within the soil. So as I mentioned, every time I have the opportunity to talk about this topic, one of our first grantees in Puerto Rico, but whom is one of my, as I call him, one of my master in the agriculture field, Don Luis. Don Luis is a farmer in Puerto Rico who has been doing ecological or organic production for more than 40 years. So on his farm, he have a high tunnel and a structure for protection to the to some of his crops. It's not a winter nursery because it does not have rise temperature as those structure works, but in the tropic we use them to protect the crops, especially for during the rainy seasons, right? So inside of the structure, he has some boxes in the soil, placed in the soil with some of organic matter. So he have this just to promote the earthworm come and eat of this organic matter, and then to spread all over the soil inside that structure, right? It's a good practice. It's the only place I see it, but I think it's a good idea. So those worms are endogeics and are the most common ones that you can find on soils. Sometimes the epigeics are not commonly found in natural environments. Another thing is that in down here in Puerto Rico, some friends told me or text me asking about that they are starting to farming or something like this, and they start to tell me, I'm trying to produce vermicompost, but the worms escape from the beds or the containers. And one of the reasons is that they are using the wrong worm. They are using endogeics instead of epigeics worms, right? So let's switch and talk more in common words. Let's see who are the most widely used guys to produce vermicompost. And as many of you know, the most common one is this guy here, the red wiggler. So if I translate the common name of the in Spanish from this worm, we call them California's red worm. So the red wiggler, the tiger worm, or many worm are the same. So its scientific name, it's pronounced Eisenia fetida. It's the most common or the most widely used worm to produce vermicompost, not for accident, but because of effectiveness that have this guy processing organic matter, right? So there are two species of this worm. The other one, it's Eisenia Andrei. So an Eisenia Andrei and Eisenia fetida are for commonly are named same. All people call them red wiggler or tiger worm. One difference between one another is that this one, Eisenia fetida, it's a kind of smaller, and the rings along the body you can are more pronounced, right? You can see more in detail those rings. That's the reason why they call people call tiger worms. So, but Eisenia Andrei works as well, and sometimes it's really difficult to identify one from other, right? But in terms of more specific terms, they are separated species because up to the stories I read up today, it is impossible for them to reproduce, to mix them, to make a mixed breed by reproducing this one with this other one. So that's one of the reasons they are separated species. Other one that is really effective too, but less use it, is the nightcrawler or African nightcrawler, Eudrulis eugeneae. So this one works very well too, but it's less popular among the vermicompost producers. But in my experience, last time I have vermicompost production, I was using this one. So, and this one, it's really effective too. So one of the main difference, it's the size. The nightcrawler tends to be more longer and bigger than the red wiggler. So, but the red wiggler reproduce in a higher rate, but by unit of weight, they have the same effectiveness, because the lack of size of the red wiggler, it's compensated by the reproduction rates that red wiggler have. But in the other hand, the slow reproduction rate of the night crawler are compensated by the size. So in terms, if you compare one-on-one, they are, in my experience, they both are really effective, and there's no significant difference amount in the rate they eat and produce vermicompost, right? So Kendanique, is there any question, or if the participant have any question, I will stop here and I answer any question that we have up to now.
Hi, worries, no questions as yet.
Okay.
So you can continue. Just want to remind everyone, please feel free to send us any questions that you may have.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so now let's talk about, let me see, there's some question here. Please send me a copy. Okay, so a copy of the presentation will be sent next week. I will be sending this presentation and with some other support material about what we are talking today, okay? So now let's talk about the vermicompost production in terms of small scale and big and more bigger scales, right? So if you are interested in start to produce vermicompost, and if you are just gardening or just want to have it then to process your food debris or food leftover, you can buy this kind of container. This kind of container, it's made out of a series of trays that you place, as you see here, one up in the upper part of another, and it's separated by a mesh. So as long as you keep putting more layers of organic matter, worms will go up processing this, and then you can harvest the bottom one's layers, right? So it's really common, and you can buy it on whole kit as you see here. They have a medium to start, a thermometer. The thermometer it's important in terms that if you are putting here fresh organic matter, sometimes this organic matter start to get hot because it's happening in some of regular compost process here. So if this happens, so if you're lucky, your worms will keep in the bottom layers and don't go up to it. But if it's turn really hot, sometimes we can kill our worms, right? It's one of the consideration that we need to have when we are doing this. But in the next slides, I will talking about how to prevent and how to make an effective vermicompost production, right? So you can buy those one, or you can do it yourself and build this kind of container at home as well. You can use any other kind of container as we will see further. But one important thing, as you see here, is to have a tab here, right? So this tab, by having this tab, because in the process of decomposition of that organic matter, worms that process start to produce lixiviates, right? So the lixiviates of from worm casting or vermicompost are rich in nutrients and also rich in microorganisms. So you want to harvest and use it too as fertilizer for your soil, and even to spread over the plant's body, because some of their microorganisms present in those lixiviates or are rich in microorganisms that many times help to prevent diseases and attack of insects in the plants. That's one way you can use that product too. Other people use those lixiviates to maintain the right amount of humidity inside of the worm beds. Instead of use fresh water, they use those leaches, right, or lixiviates to maintain the right humidity inside of worm worm beds, right? So that's depend on you. I prefer just to use it for as fertilizer for the plants, right? Once you harvest this product, it's really important to use it within the 24 48, no more than 36 hours, because the microorganisms inside start to decaying. So as they start to decaying, as well the nutrients start to decaying too. So it's not more stable product. So you must use it as fast as possible for you. If you need to wait a little more, place on a bottle and with a cap and place it inside your refrigerator, right? Just to try to extend a little bit more the shelf life of that product. But in my recommendation and experience, just try to use it no more than if you don't want to put in the fridge, don't wait more than 24 48 hours. If you put in the fridge, use it no more than within 7 days or something like this. Okay, so let's see now more a bigger scales production. As we have here, as you can see here, we have an industrial or yeah, an industrial scale operation of vermicompost production, right? So for the ones of you that are new to that topic, there are now plenty of plants producing vermicompost, but but in some parts are really common and they produce on a really big scales, right? In a bigger scale, we want to have this kind of system of rice beds. There are plenty of types of those beds made of a wide variety of materials. In this case, they are using steel pipes with plywood. In my experience, I don't recommend to use plywood because of the leaches that produces of the worm activity, as well as the process that are happening there with the organic matter. The lifespan of the plywood is really short in that terms. So I prefer to use any kind of metal or plastic. PVC, it's highly recommend to use the PVC, right? So those are commercial scale beds as well. There are some companies that are selling commercial beds. Yeah, you know, commercial supplies for large scale vermicompost production, as you can see here. So those beds you can find it in the market. Sometimes the cost is kind of high, but if you see here, they also have an irrigation system in the upper part with those sprinkles, just to help to maintain the right amount of water inside the matrix of those beds, right? So how much water or how much humidity I need to have inside my my bed, my bed of vermicompost, right? The number or the percentage range around the 60% of humidity, but in this kind of production, it's common to have sensor that measure the humidity, right? But in home production or small scale production, we don't have those kind of technology because it is expensive and sometimes it's not even suitable to invest in that technology when we are just producing on a small scale, right? So one common practice or method to determine the right humidity is the same one as I mentioned before when I was talking to determine humidity in the compost piles, in the regular compost piles, as well in the soil. So you just grab a bunch of this inside your hand and then you squeeze it. When you squeeze it, if they are going out a lot of water of the material, you have excess of water. But if not, if you squeeze this and you even barely feel the water, you need to add more water to the matrix of the worm bed, right? But in the other hand, the right amount, you can determine the right amount because if when you squeeze them, they're not pure in water, but you just feel a little and a thin film of water in the surface of your hand, that's the right way to determine that we have around 60% or of the right amount of water inside the matrix of the worm beds, right? So I hope to be clear about it, right? When I send the email, I will try to write it down and be more clear, but just grab a bunch. As more from the center you can grab it, it's better because it's more representative of what's happening inside of the worm bed. So just squeeze that bunch of worm cast, and if the worm cast just leaves a thin film in the surface of your hand of water, that's the right amount of water that we need to have it. Okay. So as I mentioned, there are plenty of ways to have worm cast production or vermicompost production, and a lot of different containers. So as you see here, it is a bigger production, not as at this scale or with the same complexity of this one, but our functional one, and they have small buckets with a small amount of vermicompost, right? As well, they have a drip lines to maintain the humidity inside of those buckets. So this is really a really nice way to have it. Also, that's reminds me on a farm from a friend in Puerto Rico, where she's using some alike containers to have her worm cast production, and it's really effective. She has been producing in a medium scale for her farm worm casting for almost, I think, for almost 8 years, something like this. Other way that you can build your worm beds, it's just to get what it's more accessible in economic terms for you, and what is more suitable for your purposes, right? As I show you here, those are big beds for more production, but they just using fence wire and the plastic liners, right? So even you can reuse materials just to make the beds. It's really common too to have the beds made out of blocks and concrete, like those one we have here. But if you look all the pics I will be showing, one common thing, it's all of them have a roof or are under the roof, right? One of the main reason is to control water inside your worm beds. Other thing that is really common, as you can see here, they have, or my bad, as here, they use a cloth to cover the worm bed. First, that will help us to don't lose a lot of water by evaporation, right? Other thing, when we are working on open, kind of open space, sometimes that help to maintain outside some of the predator as the birds, for example, right? How we can make our beds. Right here I have a diagram. It's on Spanish. I will be translated those boxes when I to send the presentation, but I just keep using this one because it's the most effective one I found for these purposes, right? So what we have here, it's the diagram of a bed. It's a good size one or average size. It's 3 meters long or around 10 feet. So for the ones as us in Puerto Rico who use the English measurement systems, 1 meter, it's equal to 3 feet with 3 inches or 39 inches. That's what's if you make the conversion, a meter, it's 39 inches. Okay, so 1 centimeter or 1 inch it's equal to 2.54 centimeters, right? So in this case, we have a bed from a long as around 10 feet long, around 50 to 60 inches of height, and around 5 feet wide. Those are the measurements in the English systems. For ones who are using the international measurement system or metric, metros means meters on English, right? Okay, so one important but really important thing here, as you see, it is the inside of the bed, the floor of the bed, it's inclined horizontal, but as well in the length of the bed. Why it is have this of this to harvest the of the material. So that's the reason we have this height as well, or that that's the baseline in the fur as well. We pipe in the collect all those the leach shapes of the vermicompost. Oh, Kendani came back. I'm just having some problem with my connection. Can you hear me?
Hi, worries, yes.
Okay, where the presentation was step, my bad.
Literally just a second to go.
Okay, okay.
So you can just pick up where you left.
Okay, so I was here and I was talking about the leachates of the vermicompost, right?
Perfect.
So,
yeah.
So the importance to have the floor incline inside of the bed, it's to my bad, I just was running to the internet modem to see what happened. Sorry. Okay, so to harvest the leachates from the vermicompost, right? This is a simple model, and other thing, an important part, is that we separate the half of the bed using a mesh or chicken wire. So we just need to make us sure that the holes of the chicken wire or the mesh we are using are enough big to allow worms to pass from one side to the other side. Why? Let me explain now. So let's say that we are starting our vermicompost project production, and we are putting our worms by the first time inside of the bed, okay? What we need to do is to put a layer with a thick of around 15 centimeters, or around in inches, 15 centimeters are around, my bad, are 6 to 8, exactly 6 inches of thick in the floor of the bed. So we put that material there. We use organic material, or sometimes if we prefer, you can just use shred paper to start as the base of our bed. But we put there a layer of, as I just said, about 15 centimeter of thickness, or around 6 to 8 or 10 inches, or 15 to 20 centimeters, right? Okay, what is important, and what I was mentioning before when I was showing the commercial container you can buy for home use purposes or small scale purposes, it is that sometimes the organic matter start to get to rise the temperature. So that this is why most people recommend to have a pre-composting process before get our organic matter inside of the beds. But if you don't have the time, or you don't want to make it, one of my recommendations is to use a thinner layers of organic matter as well. Try to crush it or shred the organic matter much as possible. For two main reasons. That's prevent to the organic matter to rise temperature as well. When we have small pieces or tiny pieces of organic matter, because of the earthworm does not possess teeth, help them to process all that organic matter faster, and we have we accelerate the vermicomposting process, right? Then we place the worms. We place inside in the upper part of our organic matter first layer, and then periodically, depending of the rate of the processing rate of our worms, we keep adding other layers. But the next layers that we'll be adding will be thinner than the first one. Okay, around in terms of centimeters, around 8 to 10 centimeters. In terms of inches, around 2 to 4 inches. No thicker than this. Okay, so we continue make this adding the organic matter in that way until we are reaching the top of our bed. When we reach it, we are ready to harvest. Of if I don't know if that's all depend of what you want to do, but if you are in needs of this material, you can start to harvesting when they are in the middle or whenever you want. But the important thing is to remove the worms from that from the worm casting, right? So what we do is we stop to place or the input of organic matter in our bed. Okay, so now we start again to put the layers of organic matter in the other half, which was empty, right? And the worm, they will start to migrate from this part to the other part, and then after, let's say, after 2, 3, 4 days, they mostly of them has been migrating to the other half of the bed. So we start to harvesting the upper layers of our products. Okay, it's almost impossible to pull out of the material all of them, but we just want to have a few ones inside inside the worm casting that we are harvesting. Why? First, because we want to maintain a good number of individuals to keep processing. Second, when you pull out the material with a significant number of individuals of worms inside, they start to dying, and the decomposition process of them could alter the safetiness of our product, right? Because of the because they are decomposing too, right? So we don't want this. And other bad things that's happening, it's the odor. They start to have a really bad odor. So we don't want this. So this is one of the most easiest way to put out of all of the worms out of the worm cast when you are ready to harvest. But other way is what we see here. So here, as you see, they place this kind of mesh of this kind of net in the upper part, in the top of the worm cast, and they place some of organic matter or food for the worms in the upper part of that mesh, and then they catch the worms in the mesh and pull out and start to harvest the worm cast, right? Other thing or other material that people use are these kind of trays. Sometimes we have those trays in our farm to pick up or when the harvest from the field. It's commonly used too, but in my experience, it's kind of harder to remove your worms from the worm cast in using this method. For me, in my experience, the easiest one, it's this one, right? Other way that you could remove your worms from worm cast to harvest it, it's just remove the first 3, 4, or 6 inches of the worm cast in the bed. Okay, mostly of them will be there. Okay, so just remove this, place in the other part of in an empty bed, and then you can harvest the rest of the worm cast. But all depends on how much you have, how much you need it, or it's all depend on your conditions, right? I'm just saying that in my experience, I prefer to do in this way, but maybe for someone of you, this way will be works better. All depend on your conditions and your purposes, right? Let me see. There's any other let me see if I have. I think we have all the basic topics of the vermicompost production covered. If there are any question before I move to the next slide, this is the time to make those questions.
Yes, worries. We have a question from Joel George, and he says, does altitude affect African night crawlers? I had both African night crawlers and red wigglers, and all of my night crawlers have left, especially during heavy rain events.
Okay, so I don't know if is that factor it's important from them. I'm living in Puerto Rico. We don't have really high altitudes, right? So I could not talk. I will search about it, but it sounds to me tends to be more with the excess of water on the beds. It's what I think, right? So that's probably a factor, but I will reach more, and if you send me an email, I will share my email in the next few minutes. We can keep the conversation and find out the reason why. But
Okay.
this is really important, really interesting question.
Okay, Joel, so we'll get back to you with some more information on that. Hopefully that will be helpful.
Yeah. Other thing that I want to add, most people ask me if they can feed the worms with animal manure, and yes, right, it's possible, and it is really, I highly recommend to feed them with animal manure, mainly because the worm casts we get are richer in nutrients and sometimes even in microorganisms too. But when we are feeding them with animal manure, if we are using I recommend just to use animal manure from herbivores, which just feed on plants basis diets, because are safer as well. But if we are using cow manure, as we know, are highly in water than other manures. So it is really important to pre-compose that material. And once the material has been in decomposition for a while, it's when we feed or we put inside of the worm beds. Because if we put fresh, because of the content of nitrogen and other phosphorus, we will damage our worms. Sometimes we can kill them, and the temperatures will rise really fast. But if we are feeding them with rabbit manure or goat or sheep, those manure have the peculiar the characteristic that when they are fresh, they don't rise temperature. So you just can put it inside of the worm bed fresh, and the worms will process it, right? And it is really suitable to use it, the manure, to feed them, the worms, as I mentioned. Let me see if I have another facts. But if you are using chicken manure, chicken manure keeps rising temperature for long. So please pre-compose that material. Once that material is not hot or looks more like kind of soil, it's the time to feed the worms with it. Other important factor, but less common to happen, it's or an important factor is the pH, the acidity of the medium inside of the worm beds. So if you are putting there organic matter from plants and things like this, even with manure, it is not so commonly to drop the pH. But if the pH inside of the worm bed it's low, our worms will be heavily affected. They start to decrease in number, to reproduce in a slower rate. Also, they will not be so effective processing the organic matter inside of the bed. So how you know if you have a low acidity or pH inside your bed? So worms start to turn with a light color, like kind of whitish or white, of white. They are start to turn kind of white coloring in the surface of their body. So it's a sign that your acidity or pH it's kind of low. In my experience, I never see it in the field, but could happen, right? So for commercial purposes or bigger scale productions, they from time to time they measure the pH inside of the beds, but in my experience, it's not so common, right? So those are, yeah. Say this, it's I think we covered the basics of vermicompost production. If there's any question, feel free to make it now. I will be answering as well. As I mentioned, I will share my email in around a few minutes, so you can reach me through email too. Sometimes it's get me a little some time to answer, but I just try to answer all my emails within 2 or 3 days. Okay. Okay, so let's see another way that we can use the vermicompost or the worm casting, especially if we don't have an abundance of that material, right? It's by making vermicompost or worm casting tea, as we make compost tea. So what we are doing when we brew this kind of teas is to dilute the nutrients and to increase the microorganisms in the material, right? So I will talk more in terms of ingredients, not as a recipe, because you can find a lot of recipes to make vermicompost tea. But I will mention what it's the recipe I've been using, right? And again, it's the more efficient one for me, right? But the most the typical ingredients that we have, it's dechlorinate water or water without chlorine. So if you are using tap water or water service water that you have at home, 99% of the time, that water is treated with chlorine. So we want to pull out the chlorine of that water, because if we use chlorine water or chlorinated water, we will be reducing or almost killing all of the microorganisms in our tea. So we don't want this. We want to increase the microorganism number, right? So one easy way to dechlorinate water is just to fill out a bucket like this one we have in the picture, and you just left overnight around 8 hours, just to 6 to 8 water that we have this container full of water without the lid. So the chlorine will evaporate to the atmosphere and the water will be free of chlorine, right? So if you want to make for longer, you can do it too. Other people boil the water to remove the chlorine, but if you are using a big amount, that will take longer. You need a bigger pot. you will consume fuel, gas or electricity to boil the water. So I prefer just to leave the water inside the bucket without the lid and allow the chlorine to evaporate, right? Just with 8 hours on average, it's good to make us sure that we don't have chlorine in water, right? The other ingredients we will need, it's fresh vermicompost. I'm pointing to fresh vermicompost because when we have fresh it out of the worm bed or the vermicompost bed, it's when we have more and more nutrients and a plenty of microorganisms. But in the other hand, if you just have able commercial vermicompost that you already buy in a pack, you can use it too, but the amount of microorganism will be a little reduced, but it will work too. Okay, so then we have a source of simple sugar. In my case, I use molasses because it's one of the cheapest and most common ingredients you can find in market in Puerto Rico to supply a source of a simple sugar. But in other places they use sugar, brown sugar. In other places they use sugar cane juice because they have plenty of it and it's cheaper. Down here in Puerto Rico, for us, the most cheaper and a good and a reliable source of a simple sugar is just to buy a molasses. You can find it in the stores like around for less than $5 a gallon. Okay, so you use what you have able and what is more suitable in each of your countries, right? So the other thing or the other tool that it is good to have it's an air pump. An air pump, you can use one as the ones that you use for the fish tanks. The capacity of it depends on how much tea you are brewing, but with a small pump, you can brew 5-10 gallons of compost tea. So what is it? What's the reason I use the air pump? Because when we apply air, that's enhance the reproduction of the microorganism. But if you don't have it, what you need to do is stir the mix every 6, 8, or 12 hours, at least twice or 3 times, 2 or 3 times a day. Okay, if you don't have the air pump. What is the recipe I use? I use in a 5-gallon or 20 liters bucket. I place 4 to 5 gallons or 17 to 20 liters of water. Dechlorinated water. I use around 2 cups of vermicompost or worm casting, depending on how much you have able, right? Just using 1 cup, it's good in this proportion, but I like to use 2 just to make sure. So, but it's not needed, right? With 1, it's okay. So other thing I use is an old cloth. I turn it into a tea bag and I place the worm casting inside. Why? Because people just put in a free way the vermicompost inside of the bucket. But in my case, actually this picture is a picture from one of my apartment back then, and I was brewing that tea in my room actually. So it smelled really well because when you are using molasses, all of what's happening there produce a really nice odor. I use the cloth as a tea bag because I use a pump to apply this to the field, and the nozzles of the pumps are the holes are really small, and if we have some some leftovers of the material could affect the nozzle of the pumps. That's the reason why I use it. But you can just pass through a mesh if you don't want to use the cloth as a tea bag, and as I been mentioning, the more suitable way for you. And then I place the 5 gallons of water of 20 liters, 2 cups or 16 ounces of vermicompost, and 1 tablespoon from molasses. I mix it all. I do the tea bagging 2 or 3 times, and then I place the water pump inside of the bucket, and I left there for 48 hours. If you look for recipes, some people claims to use just 24 to brew it just for 24 hours. Other ones for longer periods as 36 or even 72 hours. Up to I know, and what I've been finding in the literature, it's that if you are looking to increase the amount of beneficial bacteria, you brew the tea for less time. But if you are looking for a more variety of microorganisms as well as beneficial fungi, you left at least for 36 hours. So I use 48 because it's an half point and a halfway, right? And for me, it works, right? So that's the recipe I use. Then you can apply pure, but to maximize the amount, I recommend to make a dilution to dilute this material, right? The tea. So the ratio I use to apply it, it's 1 part of water, dechlorinated water, and 1 part of the compost tea. But there are people that even use 5 parts of water and 1 part of the tea to apply. Other important things when you're applying vermicompost tea or compost tea, or even what we find in the market as EM are effective microorganisms, it's to apply in the afternoons when the sun when the sunset, near to the sunset, when we have less a lower temperatures, and we don't have the sun direct in our soil because we are working with living organisms, right? And that temperature shock that they can experience if we are applying in the soil between morning, between most hot hours of the day, we can kill them or kill the most part of the microorganisms. So it is suitable to apply in the afternoon when near to the sunset, when the temperatures are kind of lower, to allow those microorganisms to establish in the soil, right? Even if you are applying to the body of the plant, they have more probability to survive with lower temperatures, right? Just to have it in mind when you are working with this, okay?